There have been hundreds on hundreds of books written about habits. But this one, Atomic Habits, continues to dominate bestseller lists, and it's been translated into over 50 languages. So, is it worth the hype? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Leslie, and I'm a life coach based here in Brisbane, Australia. I also host a personal development book club, the Vanguard Book Club for Personal Development, which I will link to in the description for this video. As of this recording, my book club has met 23 times, and Atomic Habits is the only one that we have discussed twice. And that's not because it's so amazing that we just had to, but because it's still incredibly influential in personal development culture. When I approach personal development books, I think about them in terms of how useful they might be for an individual, but I also consider the potential impact on wider society. Because as much as personal development media can really help people, it can also cause harm in some contexts. So what did I like about this book, and what did I not really like about it? Let's dive in. I really like the simple and straightforward structure of the book. There are 6 main sections, and 4 of those sections are labeled after what James Clear calls the 4 laws of behavior change, which are: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. Now remember, these 4 laws aren't official scientific principles, but the author doesn't really claim that they are. That's just how he labels them. So there's that. At the end of each chapter, he provides a summary of the key points, which really helps to begin to consolidate all of the material that has been presented in that chapter, which isn't just helpful for the general reader, but I think that also makes it a bit more accessible for people who might have challenges with literacy or comprehension, as well as issues with focusing, whether that's due to some flavor of neurodivergence or something else. And a lot of the prominent writing that exists around habits, in particular, tends to leave those folks behind. But don't get too excited, because Atomic Habits, definitely assumes neurotypicality and doesn't actually dive into the needs of these groups at all. But it's just one way, as a neurodivergent person, I think having summaries helps a little bit. So, the book presents practical tips in a fairly easy to read manner, especially when you compare it to some other well-known habits books, like these Stephen Covey classics, which, are a lot more dense, or ones like The Power of Habit, which focuses more on theory and case studies rather than practical ways to form habits. Some sections of the book may feel like a bit of a slog to readers who just want the how-tos, because the author sometimes goes into some of the background research around habit formation. And normally, including that kind of information makes me want to do a deep dive into every claim and every study that an author cites to evaluate their validity. Because as some of you know, before I started my coaching business, I spent years teaching, among other things, critical thinking skills and research skills at a couple of different universities here in Australia and in other countries around the world. But in this case, as someone who has already read a lot of books about habits, I had to ask myself, A, did I have time for another deep dive? No. And B, how important is it really for readers from a personal development perspective to understand all of the science that's been presented in this specific context? And that may sound a little crazy coming from someone who really values well-researched empirical evidence. But hear me out. If the aim here is to offer different perspectives on practical things people can do in order to develop more useful habits, if the author is completely wrong about most of this, it's not likely going to kill someone, I hope. But more on that in a minute. If he were writing about public health protocols or mental health treatment, I would feel a lot differently about the need for solid scientific accuracy. That said, there is a bit of danger in some of the book's content. And I'll get into that more in a minute. But first, more things I like about the book. I really appreciate its focus on the compounding effect of tiny behavior changes and becoming 1% better every day. Because this is something a lot of people neglect. A lot of my own clients have had to unlearn this idea that they can just leapfrog over all of those foundational steps to achieve their ultimate goals because their motivation is what's going to get them there. It's not. It's not just about motivation. Or a lot of people, they get stuck in planning mode because it creates an illusion of taking action. Look, you need to get something happening, even if the results aren't immediately obvious. It requires consistency and patience to even give yourself that fighting chance of reaching a medium long-term goal or establishing a solid ongoing habit. Here are a few quotes from the book that I find pretty useful. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. James Clear likes to remind us in his writing and interviews that winners and losers often have the same goals. Now, I used finger quotes because I don't love the words winners and losers. There's a lot of values judgment associated with those words. But this quote helps to illustrate that simply wanting to achieve something isn't enough. Putting systems in place to make the necessary habits to achieve those goals more consistent is much more likely to lead to satisfying results. Next quote. Every action you take is a vote for the person you wish to become. Who do you want to become? What do you want your future to be like? Now, are your habits taking you towards that vision for the future or away from it? Something to think about. And one more, and this might be my favorite, I'm not sure. Standardize before you optimize. You can't improve a habit that doesn't exist. This is a good reminder that even if you don't perform your ideal habits perfectly from the word go, it's still worth trying. If you want everything to align perfectly from the start, that's a really good way to get stuck in preparation mode. Please don't get stuck. Just do something and then revise and make changes as necessary. There are a lot of useful tidbits in here. He writes about habit stacking, the 2-minute rule, temptation bundling, a lot of things that would be handy to write in your little habits notebook. There's a habit tracking scorecard, all of these things which prompt me to recommend that you grab a hard copy of it. I know a lot of people prefer audiobooks, and that's great, but this is one of these books that's nice to have on a shelf to reference every now and again. I reference it pretty frequently when I'm having discussions with people about habits. It's very heavily annotated. That's one reason I love reading books in hard copy. Now, something I found a bit off-putting about this book was the way it fed into weight loss and diet culture. Not the fact that it did, but the way that it did. Let me be totally clear about this. in that I'm not saying it's not okay to talk about weight loss in the context of habits. Like, I've made my own habits video that included weight loss as a side effect. But what I worry about is how this book, this hugely influential mega bestseller, can impact people who have suffered eating disorders. Now, I'm not an ED survivor myself, but I have people very close to me who are. I was glad to hear from someone else who picked up on this issue, namely a YouTuber of TBH Studying. I highly recommend watching her video for a lot more details about this issue from an ED survivor. She emphasizes the danger in how the author oversimplifies eating habits, gives an instruction book for disordered eating in some cases, and presents potentially flawed research studies. And remember, I said that I didn't worry all that much about the ins and outs of all of the research he cited, but in these contexts, I think it matters. In So's video, she even gives a shout out to one of my favorite podcasts, Maintenance Phase, which is all about taking a critical look into diet and wellness culture. But anyway, I'll put a link to her video in the description below and a link to Maintenance Phase as well. Now, the other big thing that kind of made me a bit, this is always so tricky to frame in a way that people will actually understand what I'm really getting at. I would love to see more prominent personal development writing that includes more quotes and citations from academics and scholars from more diverse backgrounds in terms of gender, ethnicity, ability, and so on. But this is an issue across the personal development genre and also a side effect of systems of oppression going back generations that have drowned out voices of marginalized people. So it's partly a problem outside the scope of this book. Not completely, partly. That said, from now on, I really hope more authors think about this and the fact that in order for people to have a more even playing field from which to build all of these amazing habits, time, resources, flexibility, etc., it requires more than just good decisions made by individuals. It also requires addressing systemic problems that prevent people from having similar levels of control over their own destinies. Now, I'm not just picking on Atomic Habits relating to this issue, because remember, I like this book. For better or for worse, there is actually a bit more diversity of views in this book than in so many other books that I've read. And this is something that I first started talking about in my review of No Excuses by Brian Tracy. In that one, I explain why it's important to consider these things. It's not just about the dreaded wokeness or anything like that. Like, this shit actually matters. It just does. And if you don't understand why, I can't help you. Now, I don't do star reviews because, for one thing, my feeling about any book can change drastically depending on the context of the discussion. So my overall rating of Atomic Habits is this. It's a very useful and practical book, even if you've already read a lot about habits. For anyone who has suffered an eating disorder, maybe think twice if you think you may be triggered by it. If you are new to personal development reading, this is a great book to start with because it will help build a foundation that will make other books' teachings more useful. So what do you think about Atomic Habits? Let me know in the comments below. I'm also interested in any opinions from people who are neurodivergent. If you are autistic, if you have ADHD, which I very likely do, and what you wish was included in this book relating to people who are not neurotypical. Also, feel free to tell me what personal development books you'd like me to review, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Now, if you want to talk one-on-one with me about ways to develop better habits, or you need a professional accountability partner, hop onto my website and book a free introductory coaching consultation We can meet online, so wherever you are in the world, we can chat, or come see me here in my office. All right, see you next time.